Spring Bristol is back on the concrete. Let's preview the Food City 500 with WinTheRace.info's analytical expert, Greg Mathern. I'm now joined once again by Greg Mathern from WinTheRace.info. Greg, it's great to have you here. We're away from the West Coast swing. We're going to a true short track, an original true short track. Bristol Concrete returns this weekend. I know a lot of drivers are relieved to see the dirt long gone. I'm sure you're relieved as someone who tries to predict these races, who has all sorts of models that we have a track with a long history now that is a little more predictable than Bristol Dirt was. Bristol Dirt was a wild one, I felt like, every time we went there. I think about 2022 with Reddick and Briscoe wrecking on the last lap. Kyle Busch.
Oh, that was painful.
Stealing the win. I guess Kyle Busch at Bristol winning is no surprise, but Bristol Dirt was full of tricks up its sleeve. So we're back at traditional Bristol. Greg, let's jump right into this. First off, it's been a long time since Spring Bristol Concrete was on the schedule. So when you're trying to make your fantasy picks or any bets for this weekend, you're looking for the favorites. What kind of stats or historical data are you looking at to try and predict this race?
Yeah, as you said, we're finally back to the concrete, and I enjoyed the dirt races. That they were not bad, but they were very unpredictable, right? And even on concrete though, Bristol is unpredictable. When we look at our models, we look at kind of where it is. It's like you've got your very high level, like the drafting tracks, which are just absolutely chaotic. Yeah. But Bristol's right behind them in terms of kind of the unpredictability. So a minor incident, it'll put you 2 or 3 laps down in a heartbeat, and can really end somebody's day. That said, when we're looking at Bristol, it's Bristol, then some more Bristol, maybe a little bit more Bristol after that,
it's
and
very
then
unique.
Add a splash of Bristol at the end, right? It is, it is truly unique. You can kind of look a little bit, maybe like like a dash of Dover, because again, that it's concrete and it's got the steeper banking, and then some recent form matters as well. Who's been fast right now. Then even more, we'll just look back over your history overall. We're like, hey, what's your Bristol form? And, as you said, Kyle Busch winning at Bristol, what a shocker, right?
Yeah, no, I think Kyle Busch, I've seen him up on the board pretty high this week. RFK, the 2 Fords, Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski, they've run great at Bristol Motor Speedway in the past. Chris Buescher's finished 1st and 4th at Concrete Bristol in the next gen era, and both drivers are coming off top 5 finishes at Phoenix Raceway. So I know Ryan Blaney has kind of been the fast Ford most consistently these first few races this year, but is your eye on RFK to make some noise this weekend?
Yeah, I love RFK this weekend. If you look at kind of some of the underlying stats, like they have been really good here, as you mentioned, right? But when we kind of dig into some of our more underlying stats too, like I've got a speed ranking that I'm looking at that kind of takes out your incidents, because obviously those can be somewhat random. Chris Buescher is 4.5 average speed ranking. He's it's not that he's lucking into these, although he is doing some strategy too. And that's the other thing that makes me love RFK, is they've been willing to kind of make some of the strategy gambles. When he won this race, it was because he took the risk. He was like, hey, we're going to take 2 tires. We're going to see if that gets us some track position and if we can hold it. And he made it work. And so it kind of takes those 2 things to win at Bristol, right? It takes a little bit of the driver skill, and then it takes like, hey, what's the right strategy? Which makes this such a fun race to watch, right? Because it's got everything. It's got, the speed, it's got the strategy. We get the chaos, the wrecks and stuff that people love. So it's just, it's a great track for that. So yeah, I love RFK for that reason. If we're looking down kind of at the board where they are right now in terms of betting, I think the value's been bet out of them. But they are definitely somebody that I want to kind of keep an eye on when we see practice, because practice will be really informative, hopefully.
Absolutely.
And hey, if they both come out with rockets, then hey, maybe some of the value comes back on them.
Absolutely, yes. I want to talk about Toyota, because to me, they were the dominant team at Phoenix. Completely different style of track from Bristol, but you said it. Your recent speed does matter. That does play into picks, making predictions. And in the fall race at Bristol last year, Ty Gibbs led a lot of laps. Christopher Bell, I believe, led the most laps. I'm watching Ty Gibbs in particular because he's got a couple of top 5 finishes already here in his sophomore season. Seems to be knocking on the door maybe of his first career Cup Series win. Could Bristol this weekend be a great opportunity for Ty, or are you worried about some of the Toyotas for a different reason?
Well, look, as you said, Toyota was great here last year. They were good the year before too. In fact, if we look over the past 2 years, Toyota has led over half of the laps at this,
Wow.
at Bristol over the past 2 years. They've been great. Bell has led 32% of the laps over the past 2 years. I mean, the guy's been dominant. Now, obviously, he hasn't won, but he's been right there. Hamlin, same thing. He's led 14.7% of the laps. Gibbs, he led 12% of the laps last year, so he still has over 6% of the laps across the past 2 years here. I think they are great options. They've not just led, they've racked up a ton of the fastest laps. If we look at that statistic, the leader in fastest laps will shock probably no one. It's Christopher Bell. He's got 17% of the fastest laps over the past 2 years here at Bristol. So it's been, a great track for them. That said, they are all incredibly short priced in terms of the betting market. And so, because we mentioned like one of those little incidents can put you all of a sudden way down. I'm not seeing value there. You mentioned Ty. I mean, I think this is certainly a track where he can get it done. Right now, am I going to bet on him? No, his price is down around 14 to 1, and it's just not enough. I need a 2 in front of that number. I need, 20 to 1, just because of the volatility and because we haven't seen him finish yet. And that's kind of my big concern with Ty is, all right, let's see you finish a cup race. Last week was great. It was probably the best that he's done on that. Like he, did very well, had a very strong finish. That said, he still got passed at the end of that race by Chris Buescher,
Car who I think had worse tires than him at the end there.
Absolutely. He had worse tires at the end of that run. Chris had started in front of him. Ty on fresh tires got up in front of him right away, and then over the long run, Chris came back up and said, "Nope, I'm going to take that spot." Yeah. So I just want to see a little bit more finishing on him before I'm willing to take him down at those lower odds. But yeah, I mean, Toyota's been great here. The stats certainly play it out, and I understand why a lot of people are on Toyota and loving them this week.
Yeah, your point about one mistake though could put you 2 laps down, especially if a mistake on pit road happens under green, I think is a really strong one, because some of the Toyotas, specifically 2311, we've seen both Bubba Wallace and especially Tyler Reddick recently have some issues on pit road. Even Christopher Bell last weekend lost the lead, fell back to 10th because of an issue on the right rear, I think it was. So, it seems like Toyota has had some issues on pit road that could absolutely ruin a Bristol Motor Speedway day really quickly. One more team I want to talk about. We've talked about a Ford team, a Toyota team. Let's talk about another Ford team, actually, that's kind of sneaking up on everyone's radar. Stewart-Haas Racing. I can't say the whole team is running well to start this year. Josh Berry has struggled. I think Ryan Preece has largely struggled. But surprisingly, Noah Gragson with a couple of top 10s, a 12th at Phoenix. What do you make of Stewart-Haas Racing? Briscoe, Gragson, maybe even Josh Berry, a short track superstar. What do you make of Stewart-Haas Racing going into Bristol?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that Stewart-Haas is, back. Like they're not, back at the, absolute top of the game. But I mean, they're clearly performing much better this year than they were last year. We've seen clear improvements from them. And this is a great track for their drivers. It's funny, people mentioned Josh Berry. His history at this track isn't great. He is a short track guy, but his history at Bristol is not great. But I'll tell you what, it is great for the rest of the team. Noah Gragson has 2 wins here in Xfinity. Briscoe has a win and was 4 of 6 inside the top 5 in Xfinity. Wow. Ryan Preece was 12th here last year and has an Xfinity win. And that is, it's really optimistic for them. In fact, that's actually where I found kind of my best value right now for this for the race is in that market. So if we look at Ryan Preece, he has obviously won here in Xfinity last year when he was running in Stewart-Haas, and clearly down for them, right? Like they've been better this year. He ran just about 28% of his laps inside the top 10, and then ended up 12th. A little bit of bad luck there at the end, but he was right there. He had an average running position of 12th. He was right on the cusp of the top 10 the entire time, and right now we're getting him at some books at plus 650 just to finish inside the top 10. So we're getting 6.5 to 1 for a top 10.
That's not
It's been
bad.
bet down at some other books down as low as 5. I don't know if I'd go all the way to 5, but plus 550, plus 600, I think that's great. And if we look at some of the other guys around him in the metrics, it just doesn't make sense like why he's priced that way, right? If we look at other guys who also ran in the 20% of their laps inside the top 10, we've got Ross Chastain was 29% of his laps. Joey Logano, 27%. Now, I'm not saying he's, Ross Chastain or Joey Logano. Like, obviously, those guys are priced differently for, obvious reasons. Joey Logano has won here before. He's, very good. They're both in clearly better equipment, right? But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to see him all the way up at 650. Also, his teammate, Chase Briscoe, was 23% of his laps in the top 10 over the past 2 years here. And he's priced down at like plus 250 for a top 10. So I just think Priest is a lot of value. It's a track that plays to his strengths and is, a guy that I'm looking at. I'm very happy to, put a top 10 bet on him at plus 650. And that's probably the best value that I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, that'd be great though, just to see Priest get on the right track. Glad that you were able to find some value. I was curious how Bristol would shape up because the spring date hasn't looked like this in a few years, and Bristol can be very volatile. It's one of my favorite tracks on the schedule every single year. If you're talking old Bristol around the bottom, new Bristol with multiple lanes. I love Bristol, but it can be wild. It can be very hard to predict. I think you've done a fantastic job here today, Greg. Really appreciate you being on the show. WinTheRace.info. Thanks for being on with us here on Out of the Groove, Greg.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.